Pleasure to welcome Anil Swarup ji onto the dais along with our director Dr. Prakash Kumar sir and former director Tiwari sir. I request Ms. Samina to present a bouquet to Anil Swarup sir. I now request our director to preside over the function.
Good afternoon, and wish you all a very happy new year. Today we have a very distinguished guest, Shri Anil Swarupji, an ex-civil servant and Indian Administrative Services, and later he worked as a Secretary of Government of India. Thank you very much, sir, for coming here and readily accepting our invitation for delivering a talk on a very important topic. Sir, I welcome you to our great and unique geophysical institute of this country. Unique in the sense that this is the lab where all the divisions of geophysics exist under the same umbrella, and also some geological sciences are also here. We are committed to do research on solid earth and also the societal aspect. In solid earth, we do to understand the structure and composition of the earth till its center. And in societal aspect, we work on the earthquake, its genesis, hazard and its mitigation also. And the second aspect is the exploration, research aspect of the exploration of resources. That is the hydrocarbon, groundwater, and minerals. We also work extensively on the unconventional energy resources like gas hydrate, which is formed in the very cold region, permafrost, and below the ocean bed, and coal bed methane and shale gases. This is in nutshell what we do here. I got my first opportunity to meet him in our director's orientation course in New Delhi in CSIR. What I found after hearing him, we all were really mesmerized because his depth of knowledge on which he speaks, and also the eloquently he speaks. It is really a gifted speaker. But I'll just touch upon one or 2 points that in general, we have a notion that there is an uphill battles to do some reforms or something if we stay within the some political system and doing against the interest of politics. But this is not true. Shri Anil Swarupji made it happen by his out-of-box approaches. We will listen to him. And he was really solved number of contentious issues in the state and also in the national levels. And for this, he gained huge success and appreciation. Because I read his one book. He has 2 books, but one book I read, and it is really remarkable. There are myriad issues he dealt, like corruption, coal distribution of the coal blocks, and also the education mafia. These are the things. And also he was instrumental in making number of reforms and for the sake of the benefit of our countrymen. I think these 2 books names are Not Just a Civil Servant, one, and subsequently another book came, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. And this is actually a must read by everyone. But there are a number of experiences and the issues he has dealt in this book, not just a civil servant, but the one experience which really touched my heart is the RSBY concepts, or whatever you have brought to the India, that is the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, holding that card, a old woman lying on a hospital bed in Delhi and gracing you, gracing you. That was really a heart-touching story. I sincerely hope that you'll enjoy today's talk. And I once again welcome you, sir. Thank you very much for coming over here and sparing your valuable time. Thank you very much. And
I now to introduce our chief guest today.
Our distinguished speaker today, Shri Anil Swarup ji, Director NGRI, my dear colleagues, the colleagues from CSIR joined online and guest press and media. On this first day of our New Year 2023, we had a great pleasure in welcoming and also looking forward for listening of one of the very tall personality in the society, Shri Anil Swarup ji, and I join director and colleagues to welcome him. Namaskar and very good evening to all of you. Greetings of the new year. It's a challenging task of introducing a person who is already known to the entire society, entire country. Nevertheless, it's also honor to present before you a great person who has made name for himself. He is known for his distinction in all sphere of life that starts from his early education, job, and post-retirement life. His mantra has been, I quote, transparency helps you when there is nothing to hide. That's been my philosophy all through, unquote. It's often he used to narrate to media, and I would like to recall that his destiny was decided the day he was born. And he often used to say that uh, his grandfather was thinking that his father must become an engineer, and his father had thought that he must become the civil servant, though it was a disappointment for first time when he could not make to the IAS and could only become IPS officer. That was also very high positions, and he served with a very, again, very distinction, got lot of awards and honors. But the point is that right from the beginning, he had set up the target achieved, and beyond that, he kept achieving the bigger and bigger targets in the life. He is a postgraduate in political science from University of Hyderabad, Allahabad, and awarded Chancellor Gold Medal for being the best all-around student. So you understand, best all-around student does not mean that you are topper in the academics only. So this is a kind of a personality he is bestowed with. I had a fortune of meeting him few years back and was immensely impressed by his out-of-box thinking, extraordinary narration of even small things that requires to be taken care in the day-to-day life. Shri Swarup ji, I had already mentioned, is an Indian Administrative Services officer from UP cadre and served in a different positions from district collector in the different parts of the UP, as well as several years in the helm of affair at Delhi in the different uh, secretarial and joint secretary positions. He, as director mentioned about his post-retirement things, which are even impressive and very admiring. The books, and three of them you have already seen in the poster, which were that how they are, and they are the best-selling books. I also fortunate to join on the launching of one of the book in 2020, though those days because of the COVID, it was online, but it was a huge uh, number of people, those who listened and became admirer and follower of Shri Anil Swarup ji. I would not like to take a long time to tell about him. You all can get from Wikipedia and also from uh, his thoughts, particularly uh, posted on Twitter, and often he used to share them. Anil Swarupji is very dear to CSIR. He had been always very positive thinking about CSIR. While we were working, he was mentioning how his interactions started with then DG CSIR, Dr. R.M. Maselkar, and continued even till Dr. Mande. And as our director mentioned, he happened to be few weeks back one of the person speaker in the induction program of the newly joined directors of the CSIR laboratories. Shri Anil Swarupji is also known for his simplicity, and one of the most known uh, scam which he has, I would not say discovered, but managed in the way afterwards, that now the present policy of the coal block allotments are formalized, and today the exchequers from those have gone many folds. So one side, a social person, another side, an able administrator, and and on all front, most important, a person who stood by the desire of his father and the nation. Thank you very much, sir, for having with us and going to address to us today. We look forward for listening you. Thank you.
Now request our chief guest to tell us important talk.
A very happy new year to all of you. What a pleasure it is to be in such a green place, such a nice institute. I've been to other places in Hyderabad, but this is absolutely wonderful. Credit to all of you who made it this way. Now, it's very difficult to tell scientists what they've got to do because I gave up studying science because I couldn't work as hard as it is required to become a scientist. So I had science till class 12, and then I decided I would rather go to the humanities and take life easy. You've all had a tough life, and you are rewarding the country by your efforts. So when I talk to people like you, it is more to learn from you than to tell you. But I will share some of my thoughts, my understanding, my experiences that I had through my career. I've had some amazing relationships with people like you. As coal secretary, I used to interact very intensively with those from Simfer. Outstanding. I mean, I have very, very fond memories of my visit to Simfer. I cherish those memories. In fact, when the current director got to know that I'm coming here, he felt that why didn't I go to Simfer? I said, I will, don't worry, I'll be coming there as well. As I said, I have very fond memories. Now, I obviously cannot tell you anything on technology, on science, but I'll tell you a bit about life. I'll tell you a bit about government, where I have been. Because outsiders, people outside the government, don't understand the dynamics of inside of the government, where you and I have to perform. And those of you who understand a bit of Urdu will understand this couplet that I use in my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. मुख्तसर सी जिंदगी के अजब से अफसाने हैं, या तीर भी चलाने हैं, परिंदे भी बचाने हैं. It's a tough life. It's a tough life for a civil servant, be it a technical person like you or a journalist like me. All of us have a tough time. It's not very easy to perform in the government. It's much easier for an outsider to criticize what's happening in the government. They say nothing is happening in the government. But if you be inside, then you realize it's not very easy. Why is it not easy? It's not easy because it's easy to have an idea. You walk down a street here and ask them, what should government do for handling COVID? Everyone will tell you this should be done, that should be done, this should be done, that should be done, because he doesn't have to do it. It's very easy. In my part of the world, in UP, we call them Rai Sahabs, the quintessential advisor who keeps advising but doesn't do anything himself. So it's very easy to give advice, but to deliver things in government is difficult. Why? Because for an idea to fructify and sustain, it has to be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable, judicially tenable, and emotionally relatable. It's not easy. So you may have a great idea, but your political boss says, no, this will not do. What will you do with that idea? Will it work? Won't. Now, mentioning these 7 obstacles that I have, I don't want to convey this impression to you that it can't happen. What I tell my colleagues and friends like you is, you must take these obstacles into account to make things happen on the ground, because the bottom line for all of us, whether you or me or I, anybody in the government, is to make things happen actually. I have written a full chapter in my book where I say honesty alone is not enough. Yes, all of us have to be honest. That's a given. There's no compromise on that. But merely being honest doesn't work. You have to deliver things on the ground. I have always felt that civil servants are paid to deliver things. They can't say that I am honest, full stop. Because I see a large number of officers in the service who are honesty, full stop. And they are honesty, full stop, because they think apart from them, everyone else is dishonest. Many of us have this unusual understanding that apart from me, rest of them are dishonest. And that is the, I think, crux of all the problems, because they suspect everybody. They distrust everybody. I'll come to the trust part later on. But right now, I'm trying to explain to you that what are the obstacles. It is essentially important to understand the obstacles. I often say that you should dream. Each one of us should dream, but feet firmly on the ground. If you don't do that, then we'll be only dreaming. Feet firmly on the ground meaning that we must understand the limitations within which we have to work and then work around those limitations. So one of the biggest limitations is political acceptability. Because if it is not politically desirable or acceptable, if it is not politically, it's not going to travel much distance. But you can make an idea politically acceptable. Now I'm coming to a different part. It may not be originally acceptable, but if you couch your idea in a manner to convey to the politician that it is also beneficial to you, it happens. And in my career, I had a number of occasions where there was an initial disagreement with the politicians, but I could convince him into believing what I wanted to tell him. In doing so, you have to understand the limitations of the politician. In fact, I'm in the process of writing my 4th book, which is my encounters with politicians, where I try and dispel some of the misapprehensions that people have about the politicians, because I came across all good and bad and ugly politicians. Like you and I, there are all sorts of politicians. So I don't want to delve into it. Suffices to say just now that politicians also have the limitations and problems. If we appreciate that, we come to an understanding. And the biggest problem arises when we think that every accommodation is a compromise. This has to be understood clearly. It is not necessary. I mean, I, for one, in 38 years of my career, didn't do anything that could be deemed to be illegal, and politicians do it. once in the first 7 years, I had some problems. Politicians used to come to me. After 7 years, I held some extremely sensitive assignments. Not even once did any politician ask me to do a wrong thing. I keep telling my colleagues, why do you blame the politicians? If the politician knows that you won't do this, he will not have you there in that position. That's a different matter altogether. But then he will not come to you. As Secretary Cole, no one told me what to do. I did what I wanted to do in an extremely sensitive, politically charged. And we were auctioning mines worth 1,70,000 crores. I mean, you can't, it's a mind-boggling figure. No one asked me to do it. So it's a question of how you evolve. And I'll come to this later on as to what you should do for a politician not to touch you. I'll come to that. So one is politically acceptable. Then is socially desirable. You may do anything, but if it's not socially desirable, it won't last. For example, some of you may have been born in 70s when this family planning thing came up. It was politically acceptable. It was decided politically, but it was not socially desirable. Collapsed. The government collapsed. No, I can elaborate, but I'm not going to those details. Then it has to be technologically feasible. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. But whether appropriate technology is available at that point in time is a critical input for you to take a call. So, for example, when I became Secretary School Education, we had this problem of teachers. A lot of shortage of teachers. Some of you who are working in the field would understand there is shortage of teachers. So one guy who came from across the Atlantic, that's another interesting area. There are advisors within India, there are advisors which come across the Atlantic. They come here, give advice and go back because they can't stand the heat of this country. They come and advise and they're paid very heavily. People slog it out, people like you slog it out here in these laboratories and they pontificate from there sitting from across here. वो कहेंगे आपको क्या करना है? ऐसा क्यों? I told them, आगे करो ना, come walk with me. So one of these advisors came to me and said, sir, why are you worried? So you must visit, sir, England, Finland, Holland, Scotland, New Zealand, all the lands of the world. So before you could complete the list, I asked him, have you visited motherland? He didn't understand to begin with. But then it dawned on me. I said, there's so many good things happening within this country. Why don't you go around and see? But the advice that he gave, that's the point that I'm trying to make here is, with regard to technological feasibility, he said, sir, you set up smart TVs in all these schools and you webcast it from here. I said, bloody fool, you don't know. Large part of the country is still not internet connected. It's not that it will not be. At that point in time, it was not connected, but he was giving me that advice. So you'll have all sorts of advisors. There's no harm in listening to advice. I'm not against listening. In fact, we should listen to all the advice. I've always believed, and that's a trait that you must understand very clearly. You don't stand to listen to anybody. You don't stand to lose by listening to anybody. In fact, you would benefit. There might be some wisdom there. And that is why feedback is extremely, extremely important. So politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, and financially viable. In my part of the world, in UP, they say, "Pet mein, jeb mein nahi patta, chal diya Kolkata." You have to have money to run a show. But if you have a good idea, then money will follow you. Director Saab was mentioning about RSBY scheme, Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. Initially, we had a lot of problems because people didn't understand the idea. There was a lot of problem getting the money. From third year onwards, the Joint Secretary budget used to ring me up one day before the budget to ask me, "Kitna paisa chahiye? How much do you want?" And the number that I mentioned, he gave me that money. And that is why I write my book. In my book, the last couplet is, "खुदी को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे बता तेरी रजा क्या है." If your idea is great enough, then people will ask you how much you want. But you have to evolve as an individual to be reckoned with, to which I'll come later on. How you can, as an individual, evolve to be a person to be reckoned with. So it has to be financially viable, then administratively doable. So while coming up, I was asking Director, what is the strength of this place? So I was told around 150. How many scientists are there? About 120. Now, at least you have this percentage of scientists here. But in a number of laboratories I know, they are woefully short of scientists. Now, it's not that the government is not giving you money, but if the human resource is not there, how do you do it? So for any idea to fructify and sustain, you have to have the human resource. We face that problem in health. Doctors are not available in the field. So human resource or human resource component to me is the critical part in making things happen. And then of course, judicial tenability, that is a very tricky area. You don't know which side will the judiciary decide on this. So you have to be aware, you should not do anything which is patently illegal or contrary to law. Because if it is, then it will sustain, it will be get caught. And finally, emotional relatability. Now, this is very critical. This dimension was added after the Farms Bill. You know, there is a history to Farms Bill. The first paper on contract farming was written by me way back in 2000 as chairman APIDA, Agriculture and Processed Food Products Export Development Authority, because I felt that there should be some assurance to the farmer of the price that they get. And it could be contractually done with the supplier, between the supplier and the receiver. That was the paper. And the Farms Bill were, to my mind, they would have been very, very useful to the farmers. But unfortunately, what happened was, now this is very important, you must understand. Some people were unable to convey a value proposition that it was good for them. Now, for any idea, anything that you have, whenever you go to talk to somebody, you have to tell him what is in it for him. Why would he accept your idea? Until he feels that there is something in it for him. We all live in a selfish world. Let's be very clear about it. So you have to convey to the person you are going that this is the value that this idea has for you. This is how you'll benefit from this idea. But you can do that. If you don't do that, then you end up with what happens in farm bills. I'm contrasting it with what we did in almost similar set of circumstances, perhaps worse, for the Coal Block Allocation Act. We got a legislation. This was 2015. And the government did not have majority in Rajya Sabha. So and mind you, since you deal with coal gas and all, you will understand, at that point in time, it has changed now a bit. Coal existed in all such states which were ruled by non-NDA governments. West Bengal, Odisha, Chhattisgarh. Now you have Jharkhand. You have now Maharashtra, of course, is different now. But most of it in the opposition ruled states. That if that were the case, you have to convince them. You have to convince those state government what is the value for them to do what I was asking them to do. I'll give you an example. So I kept politics aside, and that is my suggestion to all of you: keep politics. We have nothing to do with politics. Our job is to do things, irrespective of whichever is the political party. We have to be professionals. If you are a professional, you will be regarded. I tell you from my personal experience, I was secretary to Mr. Kalyan Singh from BJP. I was special secretary to Ms. Mayawati. I was close to Mulayam Singh Yadav. I was close to UPA government in cabinet secretariat head, and I was close to Mr. Modi. And I was close to none of them. And I enjoyed it. In 38 years of my career, I never went to any politician for any favor whatsoever. None. And post-retirement, people did tell me, you were close to Mr. Modi. Why don't you go and talk to him? You'll get some post-retirement assignment. I said, why should I go to? I'll tell you an incident which is narrated in my book. 3 months before my retirement as Secretary of School Education, I got a call from Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister. And he tells me, Anil, I had worked with him earlier, so he knew me. Anil, aisa karo, why don't you come over today evening and brief the Prime Minister on health insurance? I said, sir, I'm Secretary of Education. No. For past 3 years, and I have gone on record on this. For past 3 years, we have been trying to convince the Prime Minister about the health insurance scheme, but we are unable to explain. Probably you'll succeed. I said, sir, but I have no locus standi. He said, okay, what we are doing is today evening, there is a presentation by Health Ministry. I will add Education Ministry, so you'll be present. If the Prime Minister asks you, tell him. I said, ठीक है. चले गए. शाम को 6:30-7 बजे, 6:37 the meeting started. Health Secretary made a presentation. And again, the Prime Minister was upset because she was trying to tell the Prime Minister that insurance model is the way forward. Okay, that was my idea also, but she made a presentation. Then the Prime Minister turned towards me and he was very upset. I was told by the Principal Secretary Prime Minister, the moment you talk about insurance, he gets upset. So मैंने उनसे मजाक में कहा था, सर मेरी डांट पड़वाने के लिए बुला रहे हैं क्या वहां पर? So same thing happened, he was upset. So then he turned towards me. Anil ji, aap rahe hain insurance mein, aapki kya raay hai? I'm assuming all of you understand Hindi. Today, thanks to Bollywood, everyone understands Hindi. Even in Tamil Nadu, they do. Okay. So, aapki kya raay hai? Then I spoke for 15 minutes. And normally the understanding is Prime Minister speaks a lot. No, in meetings, he listens. He just sat like this and after I had completed, he says, Anil ji, aap theek keh rahe. Now, a joint secretary of the PMO virtually fell off from his chair. And on that day, Ayushman Bharat was born. When I was coming out, the joint secretary asked me, sir, आपको तो पता था प्राइम मिनिस्टर बहुत नाराज हो जाते हैं, तो आपने क्यों वही बात कही? मैंने कहा देखो ना तो अभी मुझे कुछ चाहिए, ना रिटायरमेंट के बाद कुछ चाहिए. जो मैंने ठीक समझा बता दिया, नहीं मानते तो नहीं मानते. So I could get away with that because, frankly speaking, I had no axe to grind. Right through my career, I said what I had to say. Of course, politely, I said what I had to say. Whether I was liked or not, it didn't really matter to me. So these 7 dimensions, but you can do it. How you can do it? You can do it by what I said, खुदी को कर बुलंद इतना. अब खुदी को कैसे बुलंद करें? How do I evolve as an individual to be reckoned with? If you look around amongst your friends and colleagues, you'll find some of them are reference points. No? How are they? They work in the same environment, but they become the reference point. You have a problem, you go to him. If you have to discuss anything, you go to him. It's not merely that he's technically sound. He's sound person. He is made of sound material. He's evolved as a person to be reckoned with. And let me explain this to you. What could possibly be the attributes? Because you work in a difficult environment. It's the choices with you to look at those persons who succeeded. Now, sometimes we become cynical. We say, oh, corrupt aadmi, so he's flourishing. But we don't look at honest officers who are flourishing. Haven't you come across honest and efficient people who are flourishing? I've come across many of them. And if you want to read, my 3rd book has so many instances of honest and efficient officers. So many of them. Very honest, very efficient. So you have to look at them. Now, what are the attributes they have? Which I probably worked down over a period of time. First and the foremost attribute that I find in people who are successful is that they are not too hassled about the past. They are not too hassled about the past, which we are, most of us are. Because if you look at yourself and look at the time that you spend on past is phenomenal. We don't realize it. उसने ऐसा क्यों कह दिया, ऐसा क्यों हो गया, वो क्या हुआ? We live in the past. And I don't think anybody sitting in the room can change his past. Can anybody change his past? It's done and dusted, gone. But we brood over the past. We think over the past. उसने क्या कहा, ऐसे क्या कहा, वहां क्या हो गया, वहां क्या हो गया. How much time we spend? Because the time available during the day is 24 hours. People ask me कि आप इतनी सारी चीजें कैसे कर लेते थे? I mean, I was right from my student days. I had this habit. I was fond of music. I was debater. I was produce and plays. I represented my university and my college in a number of sports. I used to go around the country debating. I used to read a lot. I used to watch movies and I used to also study. Even as Secretary Government of India, I was fortunate to be Secretary Government of India for 4 years. And I used to leave my office at 6 o'clock. And people used to wonder, ये क्या कैसे चले जाते हो? हमने कहा यार मुझसे अच्छे काम करने वाले मैं उनसे काम कराता हूँ, मैं बैठता हूँ, आराम करता हूँ. So the problem arises when you don't trust people around you. And I think one of the biggest attribute of any leader, and each one of you is a leader in your own domain, is that distrust that you have for others. I trusted people. It's not that everyone lived up to my trust. There were 2-3 instances where they didn't. So be it. But 98% people lived up to my trust and I had a great time. And you trust a person, you delegate. Because if you don't trust a person, you won't delegate. You want to do everything on your own. I know of so many of my colleagues who say, यार मेरे साथ तो कोई काम ही नहीं करता, सब काम मुझे करना पड़ता है. मैंने कहा तुमसे बड़ा गधा कोई नहीं है. किसने कहा तुम्हें काम करने को? In my organization, when I walked into, in fact, when I was posted as coal secretary, it was all crisis. Scams were happening. So I rang up a friend of mine, यार ये बताओ एक coal sector कैसा है? He asked me a counter question. He said, gangs of Wasipur देखी है क्या? खत्म हो गया किस्सा. Mafia, mafia, and mafia. And fact of the matter was, when I walked into that room of coal secretary, I'll tell you, It was as if I was walking into a graveyard. CBI was after officers, after files. Now, how do you look at that scenario? A dismal scenario. You could also become a part of that dismal existence. But I thought scene is so bad that it can't become worse. इसके बाद जो होगा अच्छा ही होगा, उसका credit मैं ले सकता हूँ. So it's how you perceive. You know, there is a book by Robin Sharma, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. I don't know anyone of you has read it. If you read it, it talks about there is no such thing as objective reality. It is your subjective understanding of that reality that becomes a reality. So अपने आप में तो कोई चीज अच्छी बुरी होती नहीं, गलत होती नहीं. It's how you perceive it. अब इंडिया पाकिस्तान का मैच हो रहा है, एक पार्टी जीतेगी, एक हारेगी. तो उसी हैपनिंग में पाकिस्तान में दूसरा लोग जश्न मन रहा होगा या वहां पे मातम मन रहा होगा, दूसरा यहां होगा. ऑब्जेक्टिव रियलिटी तो वही है ना. आपकी सब्जेक्टिव अंडरस्टैंडिंग डिटरमिन करती है. सो द की हियर इज how do I train my subjective understanding in a manner that I get the best out of the situation? My friends, I discovered not very late in my career that I couldn't do much to others. I could do a lot to myself. और एक शेर है जो कि गालिब को एट्रीब्यूट किया गया है, बट गालिब ने नहीं लिखा था, बट इट हैज गुड मीनिंग. उम्र भर यही भूल करता रहा गालिब, धूल चेहरे पे थी आईना मलता रहा. I mean, to me, it's full of a lot of meaning, though it's not by Ghalib. It's touted to be by Ghalib, but I quote it because it's a wonderful, wonderful couplet, which actually defines most of our psyche. We always try to find problems. We always try to find excuses from third party, not ourselves. And little realizing that we can't do much to him, but we can do a lot. And to do a lot, the first step, as I said, you have to cut yourself off from the past in the sense that don't live in the past. Learn from the past. We all have to learn from the past, the mistakes that we committed. But don't live in it because you can't change it. It's there. In future, you don't know. So the real essence is now, what you're doing now. You must enjoy that. If you're enjoying that now, you had it. You'll find some people find every work good. They enjoy themselves. Some people feel miserable in the work that they have. Then they become choosy. I want to go here. I want to go here. And then they have to pay a price. So my understanding with my ministers was very simple. You do what you have to do. Once you post me there, I like to do what I have to do. So I must give you an instance here because one of the biggest problems in the civil service is about transfers and postings. You know, I don't know whether you all suffer from it. We all suffered a lot. So initially, even I used to get very upset when I used to get transferred, but later on I realized it's not in my control, so why worry about it? Something which is not in my control, I should not worry. So I distinctly remember I was posted as Secretary Horticulture, and my minister was very corrupt. So he sent me an order to suspend a deputy director of the organization. So I rang him up because he had not given any reason. 2-line order, just suspend him. So I rang him up. I said, sir, आपने suspend करने को लिखा है, क्या कारण है? वो मुझसे मिलने नहीं आया. This is too small a reason to suspend him, but the conversation was over. So I found out about that officer. He was very honest, efficient. All the more dilemma for me. How do I suspend an officer who's so good with no reason? Now, let me tell you one thing which you should keep in mind. If you're honest, you know your rules very well. If you don't know your rules, you might be in trouble because a dishonest person can get caught and get out of it. It's like Chakrivyu. But an honest person, since he's never done any gadwad, he doesn't know how to get out of the Chakrivyu. We know of so many officers getting caught without any fault of theirs because they get out of it. They're just caught. So better know your rules. So I looked at rules and found that if I disagreed with the minister, I could route the file through the chief secretary, my boss. So I spoke to the chief secretary. My dilemma was how to save this officer who's so good. And I was very clear in my mind, which is a principle that I adopted throughout my career, and that my team knew, my officers knew that if they were not in the wrong, I'll go any distance to protect them. This comes out of trust. This comes out of protecting your team. So I wanted to protect this guy. So I got this. I spoke to the chief secretary. He said, "File mujhe bhej do, fir dekhte." I sent the file to him. Long note. I sent the file to him. He sat on the file. No, minister kept asking, "Batao kahan hai?" So I told him, "Sir, file chief secretary pass hai." I don't know in aspiration or otherwise. He went and spoke to the chief minister. I don't know what happened between them. I transferred. So chief secretary was very upset. He called me, Anil, यार तुम उसको बचाने के चक्कर में तुम्हारा ट्रांसफर हो गया. मैंने कहा आप क्यों परेशान होते हैं? For a civil servant transfer is like death. It is inevitable. जो होना है उसके लिए परेशान क्या होना. और सर वैसे भी मैं हिंदू फिलॉसफी में विश्वास करता हूँ, मेरा पुनर्जन्म तो होगा ना सर, कहीं पोस्ट करेंगे वहां जाकर काम करेंगे. He started smiling. Now this was an attitude which developed over a period of time. I'm telling you, in another instance, I was very upset about being transferred. But once you develop that, because see, there is no such thing as objective reality. I had changed my mind so that I didn't suffer or felt that I was suffering when the same thing happened. You know, just as an aside, you think over it. Can anyone upset you if you don't want to become upset? Can anyone make you feel agitated if you don't want to feel agitated? I've seen people who don't get agitated. कुछ चुप अपना चुप्पे जा बैठे नहीं, ठीक है बकरा बकने दे. बट कुछ लोग ये बात भी एकदम ऑब्जेक्टिव वही है ना, इस बंदे ने अपने आप को बना लिया ऐसा. You know, I'm not fond of Churchill, but he has some very good quotes. One of his quotes is, if you keep stopping and throwing stones at every dog that barks at you, you'll never reach your destination. So treat them like dogs. Forget. Walk your way. So it depends on how you develop yourself. The second important point is that there's so many things happening which are beyond your control. You can't do much about it. But we feel hassled about it, no? धोनी ने अगर ये शॉट नहीं खिला तो इंडिया जीत जाती. आई हैव सीन पीपल फाइटिंग ओवर इट. अब वो तो हारना जीतना तो हो गया, लेकिन आप अपनी पिटाई में लगते हैं. और पॉलिटिक्स पे तो आज का देखता हूं, मालूम नहीं कुछ हो ना हो, हम तो पूरा कमरे में ही सुलझा लेते हैं सब कुछ, है ना. आई रिमेंबर इन माय यंगर डेज आई यूज्ड टू गेट वेरी एजिटेटेड इन ट्रैफिक जैम्स. बहुत, अब तो बाल काम है, पहले जितने भी थे नोचता था मैं, परेशान हो जाता था क्या क्या. एक दिन माय वाइफ वाज ट्रैवलिंग विद मी, सो अगेन आई गॉट वेरी एजिटेटेड, गॉट इन अ ट्रैफिक जैम. So she asked me a very simple question. इनका कुछ कर सकते हो? मैंने कहा मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ? अरे जब कर नहीं सकते हो तो अपना खून क्यों फैला रहे हो? Very seminal issue. Why should we imagine the time that we spend on such issues over which we have no control? See, we have only 24 hours. If you spend time on past, on something which you can't do, you won't have time to do things that you can. No. I remember I was undergoing training in the National Police Academy here as a police officer. So one day, a person walked to me, my batchmate. He was also undergoing a training. कहता बॉस रात को नींद नहीं आ रही. क्या हो रहा है? बॉस पेट्रोलियम के दाम बहुत बढ़ रहे हैं, पेट्रोलियम के दाम बहुत बढ़ रहे हैं. मैंने कहा दाम तो बढ़ रहे हैं, लेकिन तुम्हारे रात को ना सोने से क्या कम हो जाएंगे? बोले नहीं, देश की आर्थिक स्थिति पर कुप्रभाव पड़ रहा है. यार, this economist, I'm sorry, I hope no economist is sitting here. They make all sorts of predictions, everything, nothing happens. बट वो अपना करते रहते हैं. मैंने कहा यार ठीक है, मैं समझ रहा हूँ आर्थिक स्थिति पर कोई प्रभाव पड़ रहा है, लेकिन रात की नींद तो उस चीज के लिए हराम करो जिसमें तुम कुछ कर सकते हो. जिस पे कुछ कर नहीं सकते उसके लिए रात की नींद क्यों हराम कर रहे हो? बोले हाँ बात तो सही कह रहे हो यार, रात की नींद हराम करने से पेट्रोल के दाम ठीक नहीं होंगे. चला गया. 3 महीने बाद फिर आया, बॉस रात को नींद नहीं आ रही. मैंने क्या हो गया? पेट्रोलियम के दाम तो अपने आप ठीक हो गए बिना तुम्हारे इंटरवेंशन के. नहीं बॉस, देश की पॉपुलेशन बहुत बढ़ रही है. मैंने कहा रात को सो जाओ, अपने आप ठीक हो जाएगी. See, the point that I'm trying to make here, friends, is you can feel hassled about issues over which you have absolutely no control. And be totally agitated. कुछ करना नहीं है, लेकिन टाइम वेस्ट हो रहा है आपका. भाई क्यों कर रहा हो? इससे अच्छा एक अच्छी फिल्म देखो यार, जाकर रिलैक्स हो जाएगा तुम्हें. Then a large number of us do not want to take risk. Why? Because you don't want to commit a mistake. You know, much of our confidence or the lack of it is on account of our inability to do things which we want to do, and we apprehend कहीं गलती ना हो जाए. नहीं, रोके रहते हैं अपने आप को. And that is why people who succeed are prepared to do things and they know they can make mistakes. You know, friends, I have yet to come across an individual who hasn't failed or made mistakes. Everyone does. The key is whether you're learning from your mistakes. The key is not committing mistakes. The key is make mistakes, but learn and don't make the same mistake again. You know, I learned it very early in my life. जैसे मैंने बताया, I had done my inter in science, and most of my time was spent in sine square theta plus cos square theta is equal to 1. Thereafter, when I joined my BA, I couldn't speak 5 sentences in English or Hindi or write 5 sentences in English or Hindi. Because when you are busy doing physics, chemistry, and maths, you hardly have time to improve your language. Every time you're busy with some sign or cause. Now, then I decided to I'll work. There's a whole drill. How do you improve your communication skills? I improved. And then I became a debater for my college. And I went to participate in a national cultural festival at IIT Kanpur, in which debating was also one of the competitions. I went there as a debater. One day before the debating competition, there was this music competition. So I thought, मैं गाता भी अच्छा हूँ. आप लोग भी कई लोग गाते होंगे अच्छा, और कम से कम समझते तो होंगे ही गाते अच्छा. तो मैंने कहा मैं पार्टिसिपेट करता हूँ. तो मैंने गाना शुरू किया, पार्टिसिपेट किया, गए. Within 15 seconds, I was booed out of the hall. 1,000 students, they booed me out because I had picked up the wrong note. Practice बिना किए चले गए. तो बाहर आए, तो I said I was not in a position to participate in the debate on the following day. I was totally shattered. ये अनुभव, you won't have had this experience. It can be dramatic, absolutely. So I said I will not participate. So one of my seniors came to me and he asked me this question. वो जो हो गया इसको कुछ कर सकते हो? मैं क्या कह सकते हैं? तो फिर उसमें क्यों चिपके हुए? बाहर निकलो. अरे, you went there without any practice. You thought you were the Tansen. And had you practiced, probably you would have performed. क्या समझते हो? कहीं जाके वो कर लोगे. तो पहले तो उसने मुझे डांटा और फिर समझाया. अरे भाई, वो तुम बिना कुछ किए हुए चले गए थे. अब जिसमें तुमने तैयारी की उसमें जा नहीं रहो अगले दिन. I mean, just because you committed a stupidity and committed a mistake, you want to commit a second mistake by not participating in an event where you're prepared. This carried on for a while and finally I overcame my fears. And next day, I went to participate in the debate. 1,000, same students. Jaise they announced Anil Swarup, they said, Gayak aa gaya. They thought the same person has come to. But I had to overcome my fears. I went there, spoke, and I won the first prize in the national debating competition. Friends, I have never looked back after that. I can talk to any audience anywhere. Why? Because I know I can commit a mistake. Because I know if I don't prepare myself, I'll commit a mistake. So this is very, very critical for you to understand that each one of us can commit mistakes. So if you evolve as an individual, I don't have to tell you how to become technically more sound, which you are. But the critical point is, as a person, whether you are looked at with reverence, whether you are admired, whether you are the reference point, depends totally on you. There are problems and problems. But within these problems, you find people who evolve and emerge. Can you become that? My understanding is each one of you has that potential. The question is whether I am willing myself to commit myself to improve myself in a manner that I become a person to be reckoned with. So what I had said was, first, you have to evolve as an individual to be reckoned with. Once you have done that, and it's an ongoing process, it doesn't happen overnight, then start with trusting others. You'll be a much happier person if you trust people. I have experienced that. I'm happier because I trust people. If you trust, you'll be able to delegate. So you'll not be miserable with unnecessary work that comes your way. A lot of work can be done by a lot of other people. Once you delegate, then you have to have an appropriate system through which you know where the person is going. And then create an environment where he feels protected. All of us complain that my boss is not protecting me, the boss is taking away. I keep telling them, yaar, jo boss ko karna to kar de, tum kya karo? I used to go to the academy, the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration at Mussoorie, and talk to IAS officers of all seniority who had just joined 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years. So when I spoke to officers, very senior officers, 25 years, who were about to become Secretary Government of India, I used to tell them, yaar, ye dhyan rakho, you curse your secretary for many things. When you become Secretary of India, don't do the same thing. But we do that. So my request to all of you is, it's easy to curse others. But what is the big deal in cursing others? Because others are others. What can you do to them? But when you arrive at a position where you are able to deal with others, then you should not behave in the manner that you did otherwise. Now, listening to this, all this, you must be wondering, Mr. Anil Swarup is a very positive man, upbeat, this, that, everything. I create that impression through this speech, but I have had my problems. There have been occasions in my life where I have been absolutely depressed. You know, when that rascal of a minister asked me to suspend the officer, and initially I thought I won't be able to save him, I felt very depressed. There have been occasions in my life where I have been extremely depressed. And when you're depressed, the kavi in you comes out, you know, the poet in you comes out. How many of you write poetry? None. I thought some scientists would write poetry, no? You must write. Do you read poetry? Yes, you do. Okay. So I became a poet then, or I wrote a few lines. And there in Hindi, I'll try and explain this to you. संशय नहीं मन में, संशय is doubt. There's no doubt in my mind. Huh? संशय नहीं मन में, तेरी सृष्टि में या तुझ में. This is invocation to God. संशय नहीं मन में, तेरी सृष्टि में या तुझ में, तू ही तू मेरे मन में समाया, सब कुछ मैंने तुझसे है पाया. फिर भी स्तब्ध हूं, व्याकुल हूं, अशांत हूं, शायद अनजान हूं. क्या यही जीवन है? जो पापी है, दुराचारी है, क्यों जीत रहा निरंतर है? स्पष्ट करो, अभिव्यक्त करो, कुछ तो करो मेरे राम. सो मैंने अपनी वेदना जो है राम के झोली में डाल दी. You know, I appealed to God. What is this going on? This rascal of a minister, this corrupt man is pushing me to punish an officer who's honest and efficient. What do I do? You know, if you are positive in your approach, then the answer will come to you. Your answer came to me in the following lines. समय रुका नहीं, हम क्यों ठहर गए? समय रुका नहीं, हम क्यों ठहर गए? अभी तो हम चले भी नहीं, फिर क्यों थक गए? उठो पथिक, पथिक is a traveler. उठो पथिक, मत भ्रमित हो, भ्रमित is doubt. उठो पथिक, मत भ्रमित हो, धूमिल अंधियारे में, श्रेष्ठ वही जो घिरा नहीं हो क्षणिक निराशा में. जागो, जगाओ, मन मत बहलाओ, एक मसीहा तुम भी बन जाओ. जय हिंद. If there are any questions that you would like me to answer, I would love to answer them. Feel free. I will request the director not to mention all this in your ACR. So you can ask me any question. Yes. Yes, yes, please.
Policy, how often you involve more people in discussion and all?
As far as I was concerned, I always felt that we should take all stakeholders into confidence before even talking about the policy. So a lot of my time was spent interacting with them. And in some cases, I asked the stakeholders themselves to first prepare the first draft. So like, for example, we had a serious problem in school education in terms of, you must have also suffered, the schools hiking the fee irrationally, private schools. So I asked the private school owners themselves to work out with the legislation. They came up with the legislation, then we created a bit, gave it to the state government, it's working beautifully. My experience has been, if you take stakeholders into confidence while formulating a legislation, the chances are that legislation will work, that policy will work. Problem arises when we think that all wisdom rests with us and I have to dictate whatever I have to say. In any case, I was not a very hardworking officer. So I used to look out for people who could do my job. And I always used to feel that people who want that policy would be the best person to formulate that policy. So the first draft was made by them. My task became very easy thereafter. Yes. G. Illegal. देखिए, ओके, एक चीज सब बैठ एक चीज कीजिए, इस देश में किसी व्यवस्था में किसी संस्था में समस्याएं हमें बनी रही हमेशा. कोई ऐसी स्थिति नहीं आती सब समस्याएं खत्म होगी. तो आपको अपनी प्रायोरिटी निर्धारित करनी है कि प्रायोरिटी कैसे निर्धारित करें. तो किसी ने, मैं पहले आपको लार्जर इशू बताऊंगा फिर स्पेसिफिक आप जो बता रहे हो. शुरू में जब मैं आया तो कोल माफिया करते थे लोग. तो मैंने आई डिड सम एनालिसिस एंड I discovered that the larger mafia operated because of shortage of coal. Because world over, mafias emerge because of shortages. Whether America prohibition time पे जहां भी artificial या natural shortage होगी, there will be mafias because they will thrive on that shortage. So then I decided to increase the production of coal. And as the story goes, we, from acute shortage, we came to a position in 2016 where we were toying with the idea of exporting coal to Bangladesh. So last year it came down dramatically because they didn't have margins. You know, when there's shortage, there will be a black market, there will be a normal market. And Jharkhand is different. It's not as organized as this mafia. It is more of stealing. So they go on cycles and take this out. Now, this is something which can't be handled through policies per se. It has to be handled locally. And that is what I used to do when I used to visit the state, and I used to visit that very often, have discussion with the chief minister, with the local officers on how to bring this down. It happened substantially. It came down, but probably it didn't get eliminated for a variety of reasons, which some of which were beyond your control because of the extreme poverty in that area. You know, then you look at the larger issue. I mean, I'm not saying what is happening is right, it is wrong. But to handle that, you have to look at the problem. One thing I'd like to tell all of you is, when you want to find a solution to a problem, you have to understand the why of a problem. Scratching it will not help. So as far as the larger issue, I could get the why and we started that problem. But this minor issue state level, we only could find a partial solution to it. And hence that sort of stealing continues even now. But I think the racket had come down. It had come down quite dramatically. Ji. Ji.
Like to learn from you as a stakeholder. Fund, taxpayers' money, and fund power. And as a policy maker, we looks after the required for the country. What kind of expectation they had scientific from and organization? But always sign because when we talk of the society, when we talk of economy, talk to the translation of the research. And translation happens once we have a kind of a chain of series of things like from the so is the novel expectations. We are trying to figure out the
I think you raised a very, very important point, but it would be wrong of me to describe what governments expected. I'll tell you what I expected as Secretary Government as a part of the government, because each individual has different expectations. My expectations from the scientific community, and I interacted very intensively with SIMFR because that's where we. So when we talk of hydrocarbons, we were struggling with this entire coal bed methane and issues like that, how to convert coal into fuel. And I'm glad to say that SIMFR helped me that. SIMFR set up a project and they came up. It was not viable to begin with, but I'm sure over a period of time, now it might have become viable. So what the expectation by the government, I would believe, would be to provide solutions to the problems that government itself cannot. So as an organization, if you could assess the government, the tragedy, however, is that many of us in the government do not understand the limitation within which the scientific community works. I have seen on some occasions, we bind their hands, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and you run fast. It doesn't work that way. Why I managed to get more from the scientific community was that I told them, I'll give you broad parameters. This is what I want. How you're going to do it is your outlook. I'm not going to tell you how you do it. That helped not only with scientific communities, with whoever I interacted. I was a great believer in providing as much delegation as possible, as much freedom as possible. And the reason was simple, because people used to ask me in the beginning, once my credentials established, they didn't. यार तुम तो monitor नहीं करते हो. मैंने कहा monitor करने के लिए तो I should assume that I am wiser than the person I am monitoring. I am not wiser. So my language with the scientific community was, how can I help you for you to help me? And not only scientific community, whoever I interacted with, I told them, I am not here to tell you what you should do. I am telling you, this is my objective. Now you help me to do it. The tragedy is that first of all, I do not know how to talk to a scientist. If I know how to talk, if I know what to expect, I'll get the best out of it. Similarly, many of the scientists don't understand the limitations of the government. And that is where the problem arises. If you can sit down and communicate well to each other, I think the output will be much more. Why? Because I would refuse to assume that scientists are not interested in finding the solution. Why won't a scientist sitting here not give me a solution? Why? Because in giving me a solution, he also gets a good name, no? And that takes me to a more fundamental issue. Almost every individual wants to do good work. Which individual doesn't want? Who doesn't want to perform? The question before a leader, or as you say, someone expecting of you is, should be, how can I help you to help me? That is the question we don't ask. So all the meetings at the government are monitoring meetings. यार तुम्हें इतने टाइम में करना तुमने नहीं किया, क्यों नहीं किया? Instead of trying to understand, can I help you? I mean, the distrust creates a lot of problems. If we can create that trust, lot more can be got out of your team. And I would treat the scientist community as a team. I was very fortunate. Coal problem sorted out not because what I did, I hardly did anything. The team did it wonderfully. And we had technical teams, we had documentation teams, we have scientists. How do you think we could auction the mines in that period with all the geographical and other metallurgical details that we got from the field? Without those details, I couldn't auction the mine. They had to determine the capacity, the coal availability before it could be auctioned. And the scientists did that job for me to find out, the geoscientists found out what is the potential of that mine. And we stood by each other. In some cases, the findings were not correct. So the tragedy is that we doubt others' capacities to help me, and we expect a lot. So instead of expecting, if we help each other, I think we can find much more. I was at ease with all the scientists. I used to love, we had our own CMPD. CMPDI is a scientist organization in Coal India. We had a great time with them because they felt comfortable. See, I have believed that a team in comfort zone would give me better output than in a tension zone. It is on assumption that everyone wants to deliver. In government, unfortunately, on many occasions, we believe that until we use a danda, people will not perform. I didn't believe in that philosophy. So that makes a world of difference. Yes, yes. Yes. You read my book, No More a Civil Servant. There's a full chapter on PM. Full chapter. If you want, I can explain it here. But there's no, if you don't want to buy, I'll gift one to you. But I can explain that to you. He's a leader par excellence. Outstanding leader. I've yet to cross such an enormous leadership qualities. The initiatives that he took in the first 2 years were absolutely amazing. I've written that in. But come demonetization, which has been held correctly by the Supreme Court now, something changed there. Why change, I can't explain. So I have yet, as I said, very difficult. I had great relationship with till the end. But I used to wonder, why is he not receiving the negative feedback? Because it will help him. Any input should help him. If you want to believe and others only want to give you positive feedback, then the improvement will not come. I tell you, in the beginning, you used to listen. बताइए क्या कमी है इसमें, खुद ही पूछते थे, कमी है तो हम बता देते, और मेरी तो आदत थी, मैं बाद में भी बता देता. In some cases, people used to look at me, ये क्या बोल रहा है? मैं बोलता था because I recall in my first meeting, let me explain this to you, I had a difference with him. In my last meeting, I had a difference with him. Let me explain this to you. And in both cases, he appreciated what I was saying. First case, I just take over as coal secretary, and there's a meeting organized at his residence where power secretary makes a presentation with 7 slides, and each of the slides, he says, the problems of power are because of coal. Right? Then Prime Minister turns towards me and narrated that in my book. Anil ji, देखिए, आप कोल की स्थिति ठीक कर दीजिए, देश की आर्थिक स्थिति सुधर जाएगी. ओके, ही मेड दैट स्टेटमेंट. फर्स्ट स्टेटमेंट टू मी. आई सेड सर मैं आपसे सहमत हूं, कोल की स्थिति गंभीर है, लेकिन सर ये कहना उचित नहीं होगा कि पावर की समस्याएं कोल की वजह से हैं. इसको थोड़ा कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली देखना पड़ेगा. He immediately agreed with me. And then turned towards the power minister and coal minister and said कि अनिल जी सही कह रहे हैं, इसको जरा comprehensively देखिए. This is the first difference opinion. He agreed. Right? Last meeting which I had with him was on health insurance. When I was invited to make a presentation, we had a disagreement. He totally disagreed with the insurance model. I was talking about insurance model. In the end, he agreed. So it's not that he doesn't listen to such inputs. हम शायद वो courage नहीं रखते बोलने की. मैंने तो लिखा है इसको कि why don't civil servant around him tell him what is going wrong and get it corrected. There's so much good. In fact, I can share this with you. In one of his speeches that he was giving at the Red Fort, there were some wrong facts. So I brought it to the notice of the principal secretary. I said, we should give the right facts to the Prime Minister. It's our duty. Prime Minister is not supposed to know कि ये क्या है. He's supposed to, it's my job as civil servant to tell the Prime Minister this is not right. वहां की हिम्मत नहीं बतानी. अब हम में हिम्मत नहीं होगी तो प्रॉब्लम क्या है? You know, I mean, since you raised this issue, my only problem with the dispensation was we are losing out on a huge opportunity if we are unable to convey to the Prime Minister what is not right with the world. There is so much right with the world. I kept saying this government is doing wonderful job on so many fronts. आप road ले लीजिए, railways ले लीजिए, some wonderful work is happening. But we should have the courage to tell him this is not right. But unfortunately, some of us do not have that courage. I'm sorry to say that. Since you asked that, since I've written about it, I have nothing to hide. We should have the courage to tell him. After all, the Prime Minister is not supposed to know everything. It's the job of the people around him to tell him if there is any shortcoming anywhere. Then he decides whether he agrees or not. That's a different matter. He may agree, disagree. Since I have never been secretary to a Prime Minister, but I've been secretary to a Chief Minister. And I must give you an instance. Why did Kalyan Singh like me? He liked me. He himself explained. जब दूसरी बार चीफ मिनिस्टर बने तो मैं मिलने नहीं गया उनसे. तो उन्होंने फोन किया, तुम मिलने नहीं आए. मैंने साहब मैं सोचा अभी आप चीफ मिनिस्टर बने, थोड़ा आप खाली हो जाएंगे, मैं आऊंगा. नहीं आओ अभी आओ, मैं चला गया. जब मिलने गया तो उन्होंने कहा मुझसे कि मैं तुम्हें अपना सचिव बनाना चाहता हूँ. हमने कहा साहब आपने ठीक सोचा होगा. तुम पूछोगे नहीं क्यों बनाना चाहता हूँ. मैंने कहा साहब आपने ठीक ही निर्णय लिया. नहीं बैठो. He narrated an incident which I had forgotten. When he was chief minister earlier and I was his director information and special secretary, I had just taken over there. तो कल्याण सिंह जी, मैं सुबह जाता था उनको पेपर्स का ब्रीफ करने. उस समय टीवी नहीं था, न्यूज़पेपर कटिंग ले आता था. सुबह मैं पहुंचा उनके घर पे तो चीफ सेक्रेटरी और डीजीपी वहां खड़े थे और चीफ मिनिस्टर थोड़ा नाराज थे. नॉर्मली ही वाज अ वेरी फाइन पर्सन. उस दिन थोड़ा नाराज था. मैं खड़े होकर चीफ सेक्रेटरी के बराबर में सुन रहा था क्या हो रहा है. किस्सा यह था कि इटावा में बाई इलेक्शन होना था और वहां पे कल्याण सिंह जी की 7 मीटिंग्स लगा दी थी. और कल्याण सिंह जी वाज वेरी अपसेट कि 7 क्यों लगा दी, मेरी तबीयत ठीक नहीं है, 5 ही करूंगा. तो दोनों चीफ सेक्रेटरी और डीजीपी हाँ में हाँ मिला के रहे थे. हाँ साहब आपकी तबीयत ठीक नहीं, आप 7 नहीं कर पाएंगे. तो उन्होंने कहा कि अरे भाई डीएम को बहुत आखिरी 2 मीटिंग कैंसिल हो जाए. मेरे से नहीं रहा गया. मैं बोल दिया. मैंने कहा कि सर ऐसा है कि वैसे तो आपका ये राजनीतिक प्रकरण है, जो पॉलिटिकल मैटर, बट आई वाज डिस्ट्रिक्ट मैजिस्ट्रेट अ फ्यू डेज अगो एंड व्हेन चीफ मिनिस्टर कम्स टू अ डिस्ट्रिक्ट देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ एक्सपेक्टेशन, पीपल वांट टू टॉक टू यू. तो अगर आपकी तबीयत ठीक नहीं है साहब, आप कैंसिल ना करें मीटिंग 2 दिन पहले. आप जाएं वहां पर, बोले नहीं कुछ, क्षमा मांग लें. मेरी तरफ घूर के देखा. आप समझते हैं मैं जा सकता हूं. जैसे ही उन्होंने कहा कि चीफ सेक्रेटरी स्टार्टेड नचिंग मी टू कीप क्वाइट. ओके, ये मुझे कल्याण सिंह खुद बता रहे हैं, यूं चुप चुप. मैंने कहा नहीं साहब मेरा काम आपको बताना है, निर्णय आप लीजिए. फिर उन्होंने जोर के 15 सेकंड कोई नहीं बोला. उसके बाद चीफ मिनिस्टर मुझसे कहते हैं अनिल जी आप सही कह रहे हैं. जैसे ही उन्होंने कहा उनको एकदम बंद हो गया. हाँ सर बिल्कुल सही कह रहा है. ये उनको याद था. उन्होंने नरेट किया मुझे, ये मैं तुम्हें बुला रहा हूं अपने पास. क्यों? फिर उन्होंने 2 लाइनें बोली. निंदक नियर राखिए आंगन को नीचे बिन साबुन पानी बिना निर्मल कर सराय. सो इफ यू आर प्रिपेयर्ड टू एक्सेप्ट. बोले जब तुम आए थे तो मुझे अजीब लगता था, तुम जो ठीक समझते थे बोल देते थे, मुझे खराब लगता था. फिर मुझे समझ में आया तुम्हारा तो कुछ है नहीं, तुम ऐसा क्यों बोलते थे. मुझे पूछा. मैंने कहा मैं तो आपसे कह के तो आया नहीं था. आपको पसंद नहीं हो मैं जाके दूसरा काम करता। आप all of you, if you reduce your expectations, you are a king. The moment you reduce your expectations, as I said, I never went to a politician for any job whatsoever. Why should I go? I never went. I live like a king. और आपकी रियल वैल्यू जो है, मैं अपने साथियों को कहता हूं, विल बी डिटरमिन्ड आफ्टर योर रिटायरमेंट। जब आप कुर्सी पर बैठे हैं तो सब कहेंगे अरे बड़ा बढ़िया सर, आपसे अच्छा अफसर ना आया ना आएगा, सब कहेंगे। जब आप वहां नहीं रहेंगे तब आपकी असली वैल्यू मालूम पड़ेगी। फ्रेंड्स, आई मस्ट शेयर दिस विद यू। In 2021, mid 2021, I was down with third stroke, fourth stage cancer, lymphoma. And I didn't have to do anything for the treatment. All my friends, officers, everyone did after retirement. So, कोई लोग मुझसे पूछते हैं, मैंने कहा यार हमने सर्विस में तो कुछ कमाया नहीं, लेकिन अब बहुत कमा रहा हूं। So you have to decide. Again, the choice is yours. You have to take a call what you want to be, and then don't blame others. कि उसने कहा था इसलिए कह दिया, उसने कहा था ना ना ना। You have to take. हर चीज में, if you want to remain honest, there is a price to be paid. If you want to remain dishonest, there is a price to be paid. 2 chief secretaries of UP went behind the bars. So ये कहना कि अब on dishonesty आदमी बच जाएगा, नहीं बचेगा. Public is pretty informed. So choice is yours. I keep telling everyone, make a conscious choice and then suffer the consequences. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Actually, I could not stop myself to take this liberty to compliment you that you have a wonderful tonal quality and voice as well. Thank you so much. And I think everybody agrees with me. And, thank you also for your kind words about our institute. There's a separate section working for this and maintaining the ambience of the institute here. And also we could able to understand the difficulties in commencing the lots of policies, rules and regulations, and even solutions also you have provided. Thank you for that also. And like Akka Shairi to, I think it's marvelous. So thank you so much. And I now request, it's a pleasure for us actually to felicitate you. And I now request Dr. Prakash Kumar sir, our director, to felicitate you. Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful evening. And now let us all stand for national anthem. Okay, we will start. Janatan, Janatan, Adhinayaka.
Jai Bharat Bhagya Vidhata Punjab Sindh Gujarat Maratha Dravidu Chadabanga Vindhya Himachal Yamuna Ganga Uchchal Jaladidharanga Tava Shubha Name Jagi Tava Shubha Ashish Mangi Gaye Tab Jaya Data Janagana Mangalayaka Jaya Bharat Bhagya Vidhata Jaya He Jaya He Jaya He Jaya 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 He.
Thank you. The high tea in the outside of the SB hall in the launch. It's arranged, the high tea.